And there we go. We are away. So I believe the recording's happening. Yes, it is. Fantastic. So welcome everybody to this Stars Like You special event, if you like. Thank God it's over. What the hell is next? So we're going to have a bit of a discussion or an exploration of some of the main themes and issues that have come up for us all during the last 12 or so months. But it's not so much about looking back, it's actually about looking forward. But to get a sense of how to navigate through difficult times, we need context, we need perspective, and also importantly, as much as we would love to think that it's all over, it isn't. So the big astrological let's say influences, if that's the right word, that are corresponding with major world events at the moment, they're only really building in intensity. It's not finished, it's not over. So I think it's really useful to actually reflect on that, rather than expecting to go back to something that we used to know, or expecting things to change in the way that we want them to. It might be more useful to look at everything in terms of context, and then position yourself in a kind of a bigger stream. Okay, all right, we got a few people still jumping in, so that's good. All right, so anyway, thank God it's over. What the hell is next? 2020, astrology and you. So there are a couple of things that I'm going to suggest you keep in mind as we go through the presentation today. So the first and foremost thing is, this is a total global reset. Now, I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but I can say it to you emphatically, because the astrology of this time, of this moment, tells us that it's a total reset. So one of the great benefits, I think, of working with astrology, it gives a degree of objectivity. It allows us to look at patterns from a detached perspective. And if we look at the patterns that are unfolding for us now, they're showing the collapse or the end of an old way of being and the emergence of something new. So this term reset or pivot that's become cliched in the last 9 or so months, this term is really useful. It is absolutely a global reset. So you need to be thinking along those lines. In many ways, letting go of who you used to be and getting ready for a new way of being. As I said before, it's still unfolding. So, when my clients come and see me, one of the first questions, particularly when we're having a difficult time, that they'll ask is, well, when's it going to be over? And that question actually isn't the most useful one to ask. I always explain change to people, or I explain these astrological influences as very similar to a wave. So just as a wave is coming into shore, you don't really know where it starts, and you're only really aware of the force or strength of that wave as it's picking up pace and as it's building. So in fact, it's not until you've been picked up by the wave and you're being carried along by it that you actually have an understanding of what it's about. So it's the point where the wave tumbles over. That's the point where we often find ourselves in mid-flux. And that's the point where someone will often contact an astrologer or someone like me, because we're aware that everything is different. And we go, well, when does it stop? Well, it's a bit like saying, where does the wave end? Because it doesn't ever really end. It will come in to the shore, and then it will wane or retreat back out to the sea again. So there's a sense of process, and there's never a beginning and an end, really. This is unfolding, and as we're going to talk about the Great Conjunction today, you'll see that the perspective that we need at the moment is, at least 20-year perspective. So we need to think broadly. Okay. Another key factor for us this year in particular, through 2021, another key factor, I believe, in my interpretation, is education. So isn't it amazing that we can all be here today, connecting to each other, having this conversation globally? That's incredible. 12 months ago, if I wanted to launch a Zoom meeting, I would probably have had to spend 3 hours explaining to people what to do and how to use Zoom and turn off your microphone and do this and do that. Today, seamless, effortless. We all know how to do it because we've all had to upskill and learn. This is just the beginning. So education is critical, I would say, particularly because of Jupiter's influence in the unfolding story. We'll talk about that as we go. But thinking about how to inform yourself or upskill is one of the key things I would say for 2021. And science and technology continues to be and will increasingly be a massive focus. So if you're one of those people that says, oh, I don't like science, it's just too hard for me, or technology is overwhelming for me, or gee, I wish that I was, Amish or something like that, you might want to question those limitations you're putting on yourself, because we're about to leap forward in ways that we can't even imagine. Science and technology are the game changers moving forward. Again, that's something that's not news to anybody, but astrology is absolutely reinforcing that. So what that tells me is we need to get on board with it. We need to really think about how we can benefit from a more scientific approach. So for example, with our astrology, let's not talk about horoscopes and predictions, because kind of they don't really make sense. Let's talk about patterns. Let's talk about opportunity. Let's talk about the growth of the collective. It's a more scientific way of thinking about things, and also embracing technology and the opportunities that that gives us. It's essential. If you want to survive, not in a life or death way, but a better way, if you want to thrive in the coming 12, 20 or 29 years, you must embrace these things, I would say. All right. So, can I just check, Madeline, I can see you, so I'm going to ask you just to give me a nod if you can. Is the chat box sitting in the middle of the screen for you, or is it just for me? Are you seeing the PowerPoint properly? Yeah, okay, great, wonderful, all right. That's just for me then. All right, I'll move it over there. So, astrology is about patterns, something that I've alluded to before. So this is not magical thinking. This is not about intuitive feelings, and it's certainly not about the planets coming into our bedrooms at night and making us do things. The idea astrology puts forward is that there's some kind of connected pattern between the structure of the cosmos and the structure of the human psyche. Nobody knows how or why it works. It's simply that astrologers like myself have been observing for about 6,000 or so years that when the planets are in certain relationship to each other or us here on Earth, it tends to correspond with certain states or changes within individuals, okay? So it's like weather forecasting. When it's, when it's this time of year and the wind is in this direction, it's X amount chance of rain. So the same thing with astrology. When we're talking about Jupiter and Saturn in Aquarius, we're not making things up. We're talking about specific patterns and then how they're likely to unfold given certain conditions. So the planets don't make you do anything. They don't control your life. The only person that controls your life is you. But they do compel in the sense that there are certain predispositions that we have as individuals that will make us respond to the moment in a particular way. And there are also greater collective influences that we are all a part of. And this is really important. So right now we are going through a massive global reset, as I've said already. And that means no matter how wonderful your birth chart might look, no matter how fantastic an upcoming transit could seem, if circumstances don't allow you to make the most of that, then that's the way it is. We have to accept that we're part of a collective. We are not individuals that have the right to do whatever we please. So the more we see ourselves as part of a bigger, complex system, rather than, it's my life and everything I want is going to happen if I just focus on it hard enough, that's not real. What is real is that we're part of a much bigger system, and that system is growing and changing, and we can grow and change with it. So the astrology of the moment is reflecting those deeper themes. So what are those deeper themes? Oh, and by the way, I should have said to you before, I did say this before, but for those who joined late, if you have any questions, feel free, just type it into the chat box. I'm looking at that, so I will see. Don't leave it till the end because you might forget, or I'll go off on a tangent. So if something comes up and you want to ask, feel free. Maybe not so much about your personal birth chart, if you can avoid that, but if you have questions that might be relevant to what we're talking about or to the group, then absolutely, please share. All right, so first of all, Pluto and Capricorn. So this is one of the big influences that's still ongoing, okay? So 2020 has been massive, of course, but this particular wave actually started in 2008. So in 2008, Pluto shifted into the area of the sky we call Capricorn, and so began its influence, which tends to be total transformation in the areas of life which are associated with the themes to do with Capricorn. So Capricorn rules governments, banking, financial structures, institutions, all of the long-lasting, enduring entities upon which civilization is based. So Capricorn and Aquarius, both Saturn-ruled signs, are all about civilization and structure. And at the moment, we have a massive influence, which is saying it's time to transform those structures, corporations, and systems that are working or that are toxic or that are actually bringing the entire system down. And we're going to talk about systems more as we go along. So just remember that. Think about the system. So in 2008, we had the GFC, and particularly in the US, there was some people call it, a great recession. There was a massive financial reset, and all across the globe, economies were affected. But what happened is that we kind of, a little bit like, imagine a kid, falling off the bike and scraping their arms. If you just put a Band-Aid on top of it and say, just go back to doing what you were doing before, your kid's going to get an infection. So we never cleaned out the wound. We never properly addressed the issues we were having with mass consumption, mass tourism, corruption, the whole financial industry and the way that it's geared to, let's say, basically to profit the rich at the expense of the poor. We didn't deal with it. We went back to, in some ways, a worse system than what we had before. So the beginning of 2008 saw the GFC as Pluto came into Capricorn, and we were pushed collectively to start to transform. Some changes were made, but obviously not enough. Because in 2020, the next big wave came through. And this featured a couple of conjunctions, we'll talk about this in a minute, and eclipses in the sign of Capricorn. Question, the GFC stands for the Global Financial Crisis. Thank you, Helen, good question, Global Financial Crisis. So 2020 was like another big wave. So again, for those of you who are familiar with swimming and the ocean and the surf, you'll get sets of waves. You don't just get one wave, they come in sets, and some sets are big and some are small. This is a really big set. The first one in 2008 was pretty big. The one that we're living through now, massive, really, really big one. Is there another big one coming? I don't know. But what we do know is that we absolutely need to move forward in changing or transforming the institutions upon which our civilizations are structured. How do we know this? Because reality is telling us that's the truth, because nature's reflecting this back to us. We're required to completely rebuild our idea of what government, corporate, and financial structure should look like. So what does that mean for you as an individual? That means really thinking about where you're putting your money, what you're saving up for, or the level of debt in particular that you're getting into. It really means thinking about who that you're actually voting for and what your priorities are. Because if you're telling yourself, oh, it doesn't matter about, that level of waste that I'm creating because, someone will think up something to fix it down the track. No, that's actually not the case. The case is, we have to change now. We don't have a choice. We know this collectively or globally, and we know this at a personal level because many of us have lost our jobs. We've been forced to change. So rather than waiting for it to get better, far better to embrace the situation and look at ways to transform. What does better look like? It's a really important question for all of us to be thinking now. The reason this is so important is because, as you may or may not remember, back in January of this year, Saturn and Pluto formed a conjunction, which is an astrological way for saying if you looked up in the sky through a telescope, because Pluto is not visible to the naked eye, you would see Saturn and Pluto side by side up in the sky. This is called a conjunction. This is very rare. It happens, particularly rare for it to happen in the sign of Capricorn. And it coincided, as I said to you before, with some major eclipses at the same time, triggering a great big wave of change. So we know that a new world order is emerging. That's why I can say to you emphatically, we won't go back to the way we were. We can't. It's not possible. Our planet needs to renew itself, and more sustainable systems are required. The question is, has nature taken control? So as we're seeing this, the escalation actually of the COVID epidemic and the mutation into different forms, has nature taken over? Because we didn't have the will to make the changes back in 2008, 9, 10, when we potentially should have. We didn't have the collective will to make the changes to on a climate level that we need to. So has something else taken over? Now, I don't want to be negative and I don't want to fill people with fear. That's incredibly, that's not productive at all, but it's worth thinking about. One of the things sometimes we do when we're inclined to the esoteric is sometimes we like to bury our head in the sand, or we like to magically think that everything's just going to get better. It won't, unless we do something about it, because we are absolutely part of it. And our astrology is telling us that we need to make total change in our life so that we can create total change on the planet. And if we don't do it, it looks like nature will. So we need to think in those terms, okay? We're not going to go backwards. Okay. Now, Pluto continues to move through Capricorn for a few more years. So we're going to see the influence of all of this rolling out between now and 2024. In 2024, it's like, let's say, as a species, we're likely to get a bit of a graduation test to see how well we've learnt our lessons. So fingers crossed, by the time we get to 2024, the world will be a very different place, because we'll have woken up. We'll have started to actually do what we need to do, because it's always all right. So the Saturn-Pluto conjunction, talking about a new world order emerging, tells us on a personal level that every area of our life needs to be revisioned. So instead of trying to go back to what was, explore what better might look like for you. What does that mean for us globally? This is really interesting. This is where it all starts to get kind of fantastic. Because what we know from evolution, what we know from biology, what we know from the complexity of the cosmos in which we live, is that as life forms become more and more complex, they are forced to come up with solutions in order to be sustainable, to be viable. They're forced to come up with more and more elegant solutions to the problems that arise. So let's say in a coral reef, when a new species comes in, okay, sorry, I've just got a message in from Helen. Is anyone else getting background noise? Helen's just mentioned that there's background noise coming in. No, okay, it might just be your system, Helen. You might just want to turn on and off your mic and see if that helps. But thank you for letting me know. Back to where we were. So when two species come together and form relationship with each other, they create a system. And the more complex that system becomes, the more elegant and refined and sophisticated the solutions need to be in order for those two species to coexist. Now, that at a micro level, that's exactly the same as what's happening for us on a global level. As the problems that we're facing become more and more critical, the solutions we require will become more and more elegant or sophisticated. And this is true in nature, and it's true for humans, and it's true across the cosmos. Everywhere we look, we see this interplay of complexity creating win-win outcomes. So the more complex a system becomes, the more it will naturally be driven to find win-win outcomes to solve the problems that are presented. So this is the same for you. If you're thinking about your life and what you're going to do and what's next, etc., stop thinking about the past. Stop thinking about what you used to do. Instead, think about win-win. How can I bring something of my own talents and abilities to the table in a way that's going to benefit someone else, and in return receive some sort of benefit? Win-win situations. You hear this being talked about all the time in business circles. Now you're going to hear this being talked about all the time when it comes to solving the problems that we're facing. We must find win-win solutions. And this is what Saturn and Pluto conjunction is telling us. Massive reset to find a better way. All right, so anyone want to make any comments about any of that? I know that's all a bit big picture, but it's a big wave. There's no point pretending this is not a critical time for us on this planet. No. All right. All right, now here's another thing I wanted to show you. We're not going to get into a hugely complex astrological thing today, but I just wanted to bring another piece of information to the table for you. And this is the influence of a little planetary body we call Chiron. Many of you have probably heard of Chiron. You probably don't know much about it. It's associated with what's known as the theme of the wounded healer. And it's got a lot to do with medicine and knowledge. And that's all you need to know for now, basically. Now, at the moment, the race is on to revolutionize medical science, because not only are we trying to discover a vaccine in record time, so this is like World War II, when medical science was pushed forward in huge ways because we had to solve huge problems. At the same time, we're also trying to find a cure for the incurable, because as you know, or probably know, coronavirus, the flu, it's constantly changing. It's incredibly difficult. It's such a slippery mechanism. So it's very hard to cure or vaccinate. But here we are on a global level being pushed to find a solution. This is going to be really interesting. I want to just draw to your attention just a little astrological fact. And up here on the screen, you can see a chart which is cast for Wuhan in China at the Chinese New Year. This is the Aquarius new moon happening on the 25th of January 2020. The chart is set for Wuhan. It's fascinating because this is the chart that tells us about the emergence of the epidemic. It's around this weekend that China starts admitting to the world, actually, we have a problem. And the world starts to go, oh, actually, maybe we need to respond. So it's around the Chinese New Year. And this can be taken as a really interesting symbol of the emergence of the epidemic on a global level. This chart speaks about the emerging catastrophe. And I'm just going to draw your attention to this side of the chart, what's called the ascendant or the ascendant degree. In Wuhan, it was 8 degrees Capricorn at the new moon. And the 8th degree of cardinal signs, so this is Capricorn, Libra, Cancer, and Aries, I believe are critical for our understanding of this whole epidemic. The North Node and the South Node, therefore, were at 8 degrees Cancer, Capricorn at the Aquarius new moon of January 2020. And it's this 8th degree, as I've just said, which is critical. Because what's been happening during the year is Chiron, this little planet, this little asteroid to do with knowledge and medicine, has been moving backwards and forwards over the 8th degree of Aries. And as Chiron has pushed past the 8th degree of Aries, we have had the big advances in the discovery of a vaccine. So the first advance, which I'm pretty sure was made by British scientists in the development of a viable vaccine, was made as Chiron came to the 8th degree of Aries. Now, for those of you who are not astrologers, planets look like they move backwards and forwards against the backdrop of the zodiac. They don't really, but it appears that way. Now, Chiron will again move over the 8th degree of Aries at the end of March 2021. And on the same day or the same time, there will be a full moon at the 8th degree of Aries in Libra. So this is a critical point. So I just want to say to you all, as you're trying to develop and plan and think about what's next, I believe that there is going to be a critical turn, okay, a change in direction that will come up at the end of March, the beginning of April. Whatever's happening then will tell us. So we may find that you know, a really viable vaccine is there, and we may start to see global immunization start to occur, or we may realize it's not possible. I don't know, but I do know that at the end of this time period that I'm talking to you about, we have a really critical turning of the wheel. So pay attention to that and whatever happens around that time. It's really going to be worth noting, okay? That's just a little astro stuff. All right. The other big thing, 2020, Saturn in Aquarius. So in March, as the whole COVID thing rolled into its, you know, as we all went into the global lockdown, Saturn arrived in the sign of Aquarius. Saturn takes 29 years to come back to a particular areas of the sky. So another way of saying it is every 29 years, it will move through a particular sign. It is starting to move now through the sign of Aquarius. It's just returned to Aquarius in the last few weeks. And so we have this really major theme going on at the same time. So Saturn in Aquarius. Now, the last time Saturn was in Aquarius was all the way back in 1991. And if we want to get a sense of what this period, Saturn in Aquarius, is going to look like, we can go back then and see what was happening. And interestingly, around that, it was in 1991 that the World Wide Web was birthed. Not the technology, so the technology was being developed in the background for many years before that, but the web was launched in 1991 as Saturn moved into Aquarius. And so this time around, with Saturn going into Aquarius, this is the coming of age, if you like, for the internet. We're going to see a new revolution in technology. I believe that we're going to see levels of digital interconnectivity emerge that outstrips what we know now. We can't even imagine it. So if you think back to around 2010, when smartphones came in and social media came in, and that completely changed our relationship to each other and the world around us, I think that was just a drop in the ocean compared to what's about to unfold, because both Jupiter and Saturn being in Aquarius point to a massive leap forward, especially in terms of science and technology. So a revolution in technology. Now, if you're someone that's thinking, what can I do, or where should I go, or if you've lost your job or you're looking at a reset, then moving into a technology field is probably a really smart thing to do. It's like another golden age coming through. Now, that probably seems a bit obvious, but it's only going to be in hindsight. So as we look back 30 or so years from now, it's only going to be in hindsight that we see how momentous this moment is. But I believe that the coincidence of the COVID epidemic and Saturn coming into Aquarius has created the foundation for a total transformation in our relationship to technology. This could mean global surveillance. That's absolutely possible. But it could also mean that we solve so many of the issues that are preventing us from living peacefully on the planet through technology. So there are opportunities are massive. Opportunities are massive. If you're interested, by the way, there's this article, sorry, I've written more about this on the website, so there's a link there if you want to read more about Saturn in Aquarius. Similarly, I should have showed you before, if you're interested in reading about Chiron and the epidemic, the COVID epidemic, you can also follow this link here. So you can't link off the screen, but you can just type that into your search bar and go and have a look and see what it's got to say. Okay, good. How are we all going? I hope I'm not losing you all. Hopefully you're finding it useful and interesting. I'm going to get to your signs soon, so don't worry, I will get there. Next up, Jupiter in Aquarius. So Jupiter has arrived also in Aquarius. This happens every 12 years. So it's not such a rare thing, but it's a really important one, particularly because this year, Jupiter arrived in Aquarius at the same time that Saturn arrived in Aquarius, what you've probably heard of as the conjunction. So it's a massive kind of burst of Jupiterian energy or influence. And we need to look at this in the context of 2021, because this will be a defining characteristic of 2021. So Jupiter represents the search for meaning. Aquarius is the sign of change in order. So Aquarius is not the sign of the rebel, as people like to say. It's not at all, actually. Aquarius is the sign of structure and organization and collective endeavors. So when Jupiter arrives into Aquarius, we have this search for meaning that will be happening at a much broader collective level. And so you can expect to see a burst of fresh ideas and information proliferate. So in the last 12 months, we've been through the scourge of fake news. Okay. Now we will be moving into an era where truth becomes important again, and we will be looking for ways to verify and understand the truth, which is fact, which is investigative journalism, which is thorough, and which is based on education. So education comes up again in a really big way. And I would say, as I said at the start, education is imperative to make the most of the reset. Just a question coming in from Amy. Yep, there'll be a recording later, so you'll all get a copy of this later on. Feel free to take as many notes as you want. So I'll send that out after the presentation. So no worries there. Good question. Education, again, is imperative. Now, this is something I really want to say if any of you are watching, particularly young people, because I know for a lot of young people going through this moment, it would of course seem like your world has been ripped away from you, and all of the great things that you thought you were going to do in your future, you can't do anymore. You know, some of us can't even leave our country, let alone, you know, all of the great things that you know, I know I had the opportunity to do when I was young. So if you're a younger person and you're facing these issues now, I want to say to you, rather than being overwhelmed by what you can't do, think more about where you're going to be 5 years from now, and take this moment to educate yourself, because the future is about knowledge. This is what Aquarius represents: knowledge, practical information, collective solutions. So get on board, learn now ways that you can contribute to win-win situations that are going to improve life circumstances for everybody. So thinking about, oh, I'm going to go and study economics so I can make $100,000 a year, that's old, that's over. You won't be employable if you approach education like that. Thinking more in terms of, okay, there's this fantastic technology, or there's this really great business solution that's, you know, cleaning up the environment and generating X amount of profit. I'm going to understand that. Thinking in those terms is the way of the future. Rather than personal gain, it's about win-win situations. So upskill and learn in order to get involved. Another thing I'd love to chat with you about now. I'm going to go into this in more depth in a later presentation that I'm doing in a couple of weeks. So this is just going to skim over the surface, but I wanted to mention to you this very, very interesting development in terms of knowledge, which emerged back in, it actually began back in 1988, but interestingly, it emerged it emerged when Jupiter was in Aquarius. So positive psychology is a really, really important development in terms of human understanding. It's something that we as astrologers can absolutely relate to, and vice versa. Hopefully one day, people who study positive psychology will open their minds to also look at the input and impact that astrology can have. But anyway, positive psychology studies the biological and emotional qualities of happiness. So, i.e., what it means to be successful, what it means to thrive, what are the qualities of living a good life, essentially. it's called positive psychology, Vicky. And so it's basically looking at positive emotion, positive character, and what are called positive institutions, the hallmarks of a life lived with meaning. And positive psychology is a really important tool that we can all tap into to help us recognize our individual strengths. So who we are and what we do easily. Vicky's just answering a question for Vicky. Positive psychology, Vicky. It's up there on the screen, positive psychology. You can see it there. And this is the book. Martin Seligman is considered the father of positive psychology. He developed this program in January of 1998 under interestingly, a major stellium of planet Aquarius. And I'll talk about that in another presentation. But just for now, positive psychology is an excellent way for us to understand ourselves in order to contribute to the collective in a way that generates win-win outcomes. And we're going to do a little bit of that in just a minute. We've also had the Grand Conjunction. You've also heard about this, and I've touched on it already as we've been talking today. We have shifted into a new era. Science and technology are key. It is the Aquarian age now. There's no doubt about it. And so system thinking and collective vision will now dominate. This means win-win outcomes are likely to prevail. Previously and in the past, we lived in a dog-eat-dog world. And we still will, because collective change takes time, sometimes hundreds of years. However, the Aquarian age, and particularly the next 29 years, are absolutely stamped with a new way of thinking in terms of finding meaning through the collective or solving massive global problems through finding more elegant solutions. This is a biological fact, okay? So evolutionists study the reason, they question whether or not there's any intelligence guiding the development of life. Some say yes, some say no. What we do know though, is the life forms that actually survive and continue and thrive do so because they have to negotiate and form more complex relationships with their environment. And these negotiations are always based on a trade-off. There's always a win-win solution for something to survive from an evolutionary perspective. The same thing for us in our human societies. We are getting better. As much as we've had a horrible, horrible 12 months, and there's more to come, as much as that's true, things are getting better. You know, for so many people who have lived their lives on the margins and the outskirts of society, life is so much better now than what it was 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 years ago. This is true. We're getting better. We're getting rid of people that allegedly say if you inject yourself with bleach, you can cure yourself of the virus. We're getting rid of people like that, and we're moving into a society which expects better from our leaders because that's the only way we're going to survive. So the future's looking good. I want to say that to you. It's about win-win situations, and just thinking about how you can contribute to that is really, really important. Now, I'm going to take a breath, and I'm going to mention to you something which is new coming up for stars like you. And I'm talking about this now because I'm going to get into a much more detailed discussion of the astrology of 2021 inside here. What I'm calling our inner circle. This is going to be a subscriber-only platform. It's very simple, very affordable for everybody, $12 a month. You can join in here, and you'll have access to monthly forecasts, which I'll deliver in this kind of format, and also advanced webinars and training. You also have access to the astrology school. So if you're interested in learning astrology, it's a great opportunity to teach yourself to read your own birth chart and also be a part of a community or a collective. So it's a membership opportunity where I'll be doing monthly webinars as well as forecasts. And we'll be talking about all of these big things, including the great big opportunity that Jupiter and Saturn represents. So I'm mentioning that now, and if you're interested, I'll be doing another webinar on January 13, okay? There's a link in the chat box if you want to click in and check it out, or you can just type that in that URL that's at the bottom of the screen. So just mentioning that. All right, let's move on. So what we've learned today is that the future looks bright, but it only looks bright if we learn to leave the past behind and we start to think in a more collective way. And we start to think about win-win outcomes rather than just what's in it for me, or, you know, tell me what's going to happen to me next. That's not real. No one knows what's going to happen to you next. What we do know is what you're good at. And so embracing your strengths, and this is what I was mentioning before with positive psychology, so understanding your natural talents, this is key to surviving or thriving in the post-pandemic world. In the post-2020 world, those of us who thrive will be those of us who simply do what we're good at. And I'm going to teach you a really simple way to work this out. So 3 things I want you to remember. If you're trying to understand what are known as your personal or signature strengths, think of it like this. Ask yourself, what am I good at? What do I do easily? And critically, what do I enjoy sharing with other people? They are the 3 hallmarks of signature strengths or activities that will lead you to a sense of purpose and an opportunity to thrive. So I'll give you an example. Let's say you were very fast at school. So when you were growing up, you were very fast and you won races and you did it easily. It came naturally to you, but you didn't really get much of a thrill out of it. So that's a talent, but it's not a strength. So you might be good at something, but it only becomes a strength when you actually enjoy sharing it with other people. So there has to be that element of joy. There has to be that sense of inspiration, and you have to get a sense of expansion from employing that strength. So I just want you to remember those three things. As you're thinking about what you might do in 2021 or how you might pivot or reset or change your world, really think about what your signature strengths are, because that's what the world wants from you. You know, that's what you're going to get your biggest paycheck from. That's what, you know, the universe is saying, just be you, please just be you. And in fact, if we were all just ourselves, the world would be a far, far better place. So how do we know what our strengths are? This is where we have the Zodiac. So we as astrologers, we're so lucky, we're so blessed, because we have understood that the qualities of the human mind are, or sorry, as I said at the start, the structures of the human mind are reflected in the structures of the cosmos. So all we need to do is look at those structures, and that will help us work out who we are and what we need to do. So I'm just going to run through each of the 12 signs of the Zodiac. Really simple stuff here, but I'm just going to trigger a couple of ideas for you in terms of your strengths, okay? So if you're Aries, this means that one of your big strengths that you can employ in this coming year is your propensity for initiative, to take action and to be innovative. This is very much a flavor of the Aquarian age that we're in. So if you're born with the sun in particular in Aries, really looking at ways to innovate and pioneer is going to work really well for you. If one of your strengths comes from your ability to consolidate, to look at a new idea and say, well, is it actually going to work? And this is a great strength for Taurus. Sometimes what Taurians do is they'll miss out on creating a bit more structure in their life because they're a little bit afraid of what would happen if I wasn't comfortable from the beginning, or, you know, what are the unknown elements? And that's a mistake, because if you're Taurus, if you've got the sun in Taurus, you're going to be naturally really good at bringing a practical solution to things. So I want to say to you, test out some of the ideas that are emerging. Don't sit on the sidelines and wait for things to get comfortable or easy, because they probably won't. Rather, trust yourself to know that you can probably make a good go if you just put some effort in. All right, next up we've got Gemini. So this is, in lots of ways, Geminis might find that this is a bit of an easy time, in the sense that one of the key strengths for people born with the sun in Gemini is adaptability. So the capacity to change, shift, and move with the moment. The next 12 or so months are going to involve so many changes. There's going to be so many challenges and kind of rough water to surf. So if you're a Gemini, you're kind of really equipped to do that anyway. I mentioned before the importance of learning. So if you've got the sun in Gemini, I would suggest to you, make the most of this time to learn, upskill, and broaden your knowledge base, because it's the best thing you could be doing right now. Cancer. So those of you who've got the sun in Cancer, this Aquarian age, I've been talking about science, technology, systems, all this kind of stuff. It's not really anything to do with Cancer. Cancer is much more to do with family, nurture, connection, that kind of stuff. Or is it? Because I would say to you, if you've got the sun in Cancer, one of your great strengths is what we call emotional intelligence, your ability to describe what you're feeling as well as what other people are feeling. And this is a key thing for 2021, the capacity to read the moment and then describe it or take action about it. So if you're born with the sun in Cancer, really spend some time focusing on developing your emotional intelligence, developing that skill, which is recognizing an intuitive feeling or a hunch, and then translating that into action. That's key for making the most of this time. Leo. Now, Leo has incredible strengths when it comes to getting other people to follow them. So this is the sign of leadership. But at the moment, what Leos can really do is benefit from thinking in terms of collaboration. Sometimes with Leo, there's a little bit of an emphasis on me. It's all about me. And in the next 12 or so months, or in fact in the years ahead, Leos will be learning that everything works better when we share. Because as I said to you before, it's the age of the win-win situation, or the win-win circumstance. So if you're born with the sun in Leo, I want to encourage you to be thinking about what you'd like to do and who I'd like to share it with. So the big word is collaboration, because through collaboration, you get better at finding win-win solutions. And the better you are at doing that, the more you're going to get. Okay? Good. Virgo. Now, Virgo is what we call a mutable earth sign. And what that means is Virgos and Aquarians are the system thinking specialists of the zodiac. So if you're born with the sun in Virgo, one of your great strengths is your ability to problem solve and navigate complexity. Virgos get themselves stuck and in trouble when they focus too much on the minutiae. If you've got the sun in Virgo, I want to say to you, trust your ability to solve problems and look for practical ways of doing it, because this age that we're moving into, it's one of massive complexity. And in that complexity, this is where you can shine, because nobody knows how to break complexity down into manageable, bite-sized chunks better than a Virgo. So if you've got the sun in Virgo, think about how you can use that practical problem-solving ability in a way that helps the world around you. Just a thought came into my mind, and I should have said this from the start. When I'm talking about your sun sign, it's also really important to think about the house your sun is in. So what I mean to say is, if your sun is in Virgo, that's one aspect. And the other aspect of your strength is going to be described by the house position that the sun is in. We can't go into that all today. Those of you who join the inner circle, we definitely can. But just so that you know, it's really about thinking about your sun sign and house. That will really help you to understand your signature strengths in many ways. Okay, next up, Libra. Now, Libra, this is also, in some senses, a great time for Libra, because it's a time of collaboration or connection. And if you've got the sun in Libra, you're going to be impelled to form relationship and form partnership. Sometimes the problem for Librans is that I'll stand there waiting on the side, not sure of what to do, because I'm more concerned with the approval I'm getting for my actions rather than the impact. So if you're born with the sun in Libra, I want to say to you, collaboration and partnership is your natural, it's the place for you to be, but focus less on the approval of others and focus more on the impact you're having. Because if you're having impact in the world and you're collaborating with other people, you're naturally attuned to finding that middle ground. Librans have this great internal mechanism to find the sweet spot in every negotiation. So employ that and make sure you're having impact rather than being popular, okay? Which is an important thing for Librans to learn. Whew. All right, lots of talking. Next up, we have Scorpio. One of the great talents for those of you born with the sun in Scorpio is what I like to call the human touch. Scorpios bring an understanding of the good and the bad in everyone, and that is key because no one can understand and appreciate what it means to be human more than a Scorpio. And so if you've got the sun in Scorpio, bringing this understanding, bringing your insight, a little bit like Cancer, that emotional intelligence, but in this case, Scorpio is a bit more has a bit more of an edge. Accepting people for what they are and helping them to see where their obstacles and stumbling blocks lie. So if this is you, Sun and Scorpio person, think about in 2021 how you can help others remove the obstacles in their life, because whether you do it emotionally or materially or physically, you have a great aptitude for moving through crisis, and this is the time to really use it and find your strength. Sagittarius, the next sign. Now, this is the sign of the future, and Sagittarians are people who hate to be bounded in. So if you've got the sun in Sagittarius, you may be having a very difficult time right now, being told, you can't leave your apartment, you can't leave your city, you can't leave your country, you can't plan for the future because no one knows what's going to happen. It's true, but it's not true. So if you've got the sun in Sagittarius, then I really want you to use your future vision, because you have the best capacity to see into the future, to look to what's ahead, to look to what's next. So don't lose hope, don't lose inspiration. Even if you can't do anything right now and in the short term, you will be able to in the future. So keep dreaming, stay inspired, and keep imagining how far you could be, because that's your birthright. Sagittarians bring the future in, and we need you to keep on imagining the way things are going to be. That's a win-win solution in and of itself. Capricorn. All right, so Capricorn, like Taurus, has this great ability to bring the practical reality to things. And for many of you with the sun in Capricorn, you've been going through a huge amount of tests and challenges in the last few years because of all the planetary influences in your sign. But now that things are moving into Aquarius, it's time to test out what before was just a concept. So you've had plenty of opportunity to do soul searching in the last couple of years. Now it's time to move and take action. So I want to say to you, if you're born with the sun in Capricorn, put a stake in the ground, try it out, test it, do something. Even if it's a small step forward, even if you just buy a pot plant for your apartment and you can't leave, it doesn't matter. It's a step forward. And the step forward is what you absolutely need right now. All our cardinal signs, Aries, Cancer, Libra, Capricorn, need steps forward. Sitting still is not useful. Stepping forward. So if you're sun in Capricorn person, all the trials and tribulations in some senses are behind you. It's time to put your ideas to work. All right, next up we have Aquarius. Now this is such a fun sign, and it's the Aquarian age, and I'm probably some of you listening now are Aquarians, of course. You guys get misunderstood all the time, and I'm imagining you're probably getting sick of being heard that you're the rebels and the outsiders of the Zodiac, because, well, some of you are, but just as many of you aren't. So it kind of isn't true. But what you are is incredibly logical and often very practical people. And Aquarians are just often more themselves than anybody else. One of the strengths of being a sun in Aquarius person is knowing what you do want and what you don't want. It's a bit black and it's a bit white, and that's good because that clarity gives you detachment and objectivity. So Aquarians are just more themselves than most of us are prepared to be. So if you're born with the sun in Aquarius, it's your time. Be you. Take that unique vision that you have, even if no one else can see it, it doesn't matter. You're here to really express your full individuality. So as you become clearer on what's important to you, win-win situations and system thinking is just natural for you anyway. As it becomes clear to you what you can do and where your talents lie, get out there and do it. Don't wait for anybody else. It's time for you to move forward as well. Time for all of us to move forward, but especially Aquarius, because your view of the big picture is what we all need now. All right, and lastly, and following on a similar vein, we've got Pisces. So those of you born with the sun in Pisces, Yes, it's a future-oriented sign, and Pisces have this great feeling or intuitive knowledge about the future and where things could be. So if you've got the sun in Pisces, it's time to get out of despair, okay? It's kind of easy for you guys to fall into despair and to start to tell yourself stories which make you the victim. And I'm not saying that to criticize you in any way. I'm saying that to you because you have a choice. And the other choice is to see the highest parts of who you are, because you have the ability to embody the highest qualities of human nature. And the more that you do that, the more you give everybody else an example of what good really looks like. So rather than reflecting on all the things you don't have and all of the difficulties and hardships, Pisces, focus on the best parts of you, the most fabulous, fantastic, and creative parts and amazing parts of you. Focus on them, identify them, and be them, because we need that. We all need that now. We need an example of what real good looks like. All right, so there we go. Around the zodiac with a little bit of a sense of ways to take advantage of 2021. Now there's some, I'll come to a question in a minute, Carolyn. There's some information I put up on the website, just a brief little snapshot if you're interested in some of this, looking at your sign going into 2021. But as I said, if you want the real juice, if you want the real deal, and if you want the conversation rather than just, silly predictions, which, whatever. If you want to have the real conversation, get involved. So that means joining in the inner circle, joining in the member site. The URL is in the chat box, or you can follow it there too. Join us and we'll have a much more detailed look at the astrology of the moment, but also well-being. So another big part of the inner circle is looking at wellness, well-being, and all the things that we can learn from that in terms of understanding how to navigate through this time of change. All right, so question from Carolyn. Is there likely to be a rush of energy moving forward? Everything feels so static or stuck. One step forward, one step back. I think that quality of one step forward, one step back is very much the moment that we're in, Carolyn, because this is building resilience in the truest sense of the word. 2 years ago, we were all rushing around so busy thinking about our next holiday and our conflicts with our boss and where we want to be and what we want to study and who we want to be in a relationship with. We were all living in this next kind of world. And now we've stopped and we can't think like that anymore. And, it's like suddenly I make a plan and then the next thing it changes. In that place is where you're going to find the qualities that are being taught. In that place, you're going to find those strengths inside you and you're going to find ways to use them. So I don't think we're going to have a massive rush forward necessarily, but Saturn and Jupiter aligning in Aquarius tells us that there is now a shift into a new era, and the signs of that are starting to emerge. But I will say to you, in the last sort of 2 or so weeks, what we've seen is a mutated form of coronavirus emerge. We've seen in Australia, where coronavirus was virtually eliminated, it suddenly resurged back again. So there are some challenging things happening right now, which are saying, be patient and focus on building those strengths that you have and thinking about those win-win situations. Don't expect it to be rushing back to what it was. I don't think that's going to be happening for a while. Claire's comment, any thoughts about the environment? Absolutely essential. If we don't do it, we are going to be replaced by another by another life form. Let's just say that extinction is a reality, and it happens to species who do not adapt and evolve and create complex win-win relationships with their environment. And if that happens to the human species, who I wouldn't be surprised, I don't think it will. I don't think that's what's going to happen. But we have these intense problems to solve. Science and technology will help us do that. And it's in the solving of the problem that we're all going to learn to live on the planet in a more harmonious ways. Okay. Beth, not seeing a link to the inner circle. It's in the chat box right at the very, very top. So if you scroll to the top, you'll be able to hit that directly, or you can just enter this URL, which I know is a little bit cumbersome, but you can just do astrology schools, you bundles /astrology school in a circle, you'll find it. But I'll also be sending this out to you on the, so if you're on the email list, of course, you'll be getting those links anyway. And lastly, a question from Michelle. As many world leaders are Geminian, I'm interested in your thoughts on adaptability. I'm sensing, Michelle, that might be a double question. I'm not sure which leaders you're talking about, but the role of a leader sometimes is a reflection of the will of the people and the entire body politic of which they're a part. So the individual leader, whatever their characteristics are, oh, Donald Trump actually is a Geminian, whatever their characteristics are, it doesn't mean that they're going to be leading their government along those lines, because government's not one, unless it's a dictatorship. Speaking of Trump, though, you can definitely see his Geminian qualities in the way that he will constantly just lie. He'll say anything. He'll say anything. He'll just go from one thing to the next, creating miscommunication and confusion, which is a very Geminian thing to do. And you can see how he could use that skill to inspire and uplift people, or he can use that skill to undermine and destabilize the country. We know what he's done. So going forward, leaders who are more adaptable, I would say, will be leaders who focus on the win-win situation for their community, rather than the profits of industry and the profits that can be gained. Helen's question: can we share the recording? Absolutely, it's going to be on YouTube, so free to the world. And from Jessica, look. Thanks, looking like a rock and roll kind of future then. Yeah, pretty much, rock and roll, a bit of this and a bit of that, but I want to say, just to finish off, be strong, because this is about being who you, and when you find that through astrology or through some other tool, then nothing can take that away from you. And every time you put your energy into something, you're going to create a win-win situation. So we can all take heart from the fact that, okay, we have to stand still for a little bit, but this gives us the opportunity to reset, relearn, and come into the future a lot stronger than we were before. Yes, so everyone is asking about the links. Yeah, you're going to get links to all of this in the recordings that are going to come afterwards. So don't worry, if you've signed up for the webinar, which you have, you're going to get all the details that we've been talking about today. So I think that's it. So thank you, everybody, for your great attention and for tuning in and sharing today. And I've really enjoyed it. And Happy New Year. May 2021 be your year. That's the thing. All right, folks. Thank